That was mind-blowing. But now we're to a point where really so many other people should be prosecuted, should be held accountable. A brief clip from the interview with Virginia Giuffre, the victim of the Epstein sex trafficking. Now, Epstein was definitely a higher up, a manager of this system, but he was not the end of this system. It went higher than him. But he was obviously an important part of it, and the mainstream media wants to pretend that that's where it ends, that it ends with him and Ghislaine Maxwell. But anyway, I'll get into more of this in a second. So this is, she was a very young woman, underage, in fact, when she says she was trafficked to Prince Andrew. So I'm going to play this clip.
First time in London, I was so young. Keelan woke me up in the morning and said, "You're going to meet a prince today." I didn't know at that point that I was going to be trafficked to that prince. And then that night, Prince Andrew came to her house in London, and we went out to Club Tramp. Prince Andrew got me alcohol. It was in the VIP section. I'm pretty sure it was vodka. Prince Andrew was like, "Let's dance together." And I was like, okay. And we leave Club Tramp, and I hop in the car with Ghislaine and Jeffrey, and Ghislaine said he's coming back to the house, and I want you to do for him what you do for Epstein. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that even royalty were involved.
So I know some of you may be thinking this is an old story. We've been hearing about the accusations against Prince Andrew for a while now. The lawsuit's been going on for at least a year or 2 years or something. So, but this interview and other interviews I think she's been doing are new, and it really is impressive that the mainstream media is covering this at all, and willing to interview her. But the side of it that I wanted to talk about outside of just the mainstream media is there is so, outside of what they'll show you, is there is so much to this story. And I don't know it all. So, if I knew it all, I'd just be spouting it to you. But there's so much to the story that goes way beyond just Epstein, Ghislaine, and, and I pronounce her name different every time because it doesn't seem anyone knows how to pronounce it, because I've watched 15 news sources on how to pronounce Ghislaine, and they all pronounce it differently. Anyway, Ghislaine Maxwell, people act like that's where, it was her and him. They had this sex trafficking industry and they did it, and we know that Bill Clinton went on the jet 26 times. But to get to just a little aspect of how much larger this is, there were tons of names in his black book. Now, that not every name in his black book doesn't mean that he trafficked sex to them. Obviously, he's going to know powerful people. If he's trying to connect himself with powerful people, he's going to put them in his black book, whether that means they were getting sex or not, because he wants to continue to have contact with them. But there's tons of names in there. Some of them, obviously, should be at the minimum looked into, probably prosecuted. And there's none of it other than Prince Andrew. Who else have they really gone after? It's Epstein, Ghislaine, Prince Andrew a little. Like, nothing. Fucking nothing. And they have tons of information. The FBI went to Epstein's location after he was arrested and took out truckloads of information that no one has ever seen. I'm pretty sure they, like, if you watch the truck, it pulls up to the Manhattan residence. They fill it with laptops and books and papers and everything. And then they drove, there's video of this, they drove the truck into the East River and they just kabloosh, and it just left it down there. There's not actually video of that, but that's what it feels like, is they just filled it up and then just into a black hole somewhere, and we're never going to see any of it. And so, to me, the biggest part of this story, now, initially, obviously, was this stuff was horrifying. I mean, it's still horrifying, but This is what we learned. Like, we were like, wait, what? Someone was sex trafficked to Prince Andrew, and they're talking about it publicly. Like, that was mind blowing. But now we're to a point where really so many other people should be prosecuted, should be held accountable. He had connections, business connections to so many. And it's all just been swept under the rug. Some people have been quietly moved aside in various organizations. Some people are not as prevalent, but there's been no prosecutions whatsoever outside of Ghislaine Maxwell. That's crazy. It's insanity, and that the mainstream media is willing to. They're willing to interview someone like Virginia Giuffre. Well, some of them are. Most of them are not, but some of them are. And yet not dig deeper. Not ever say anything else happened. And, I think they just know that kind of thing is the kind of thing that gets you kicked out of the mainstream media. They're just aware of that. And so they keep their mouths shut because they're not paid to actually look into things. That's an important point in your political education as a human, is the point you realize, your mainstream media is not meant to look into things. They're not meant to get to the bottom of something. They're meant to act like they're getting to the bottom of something while staying within the allowable parameters of what you can show on television. Even that interview that I just showed you a clip of with the victim of Epstein, even that interview, those type of interviews with her were only allowed, quote unquote, after Epstein was already arrested, after it was already a public story. And basically the mainstream media was like, well, it's out, so now we can kind of cover it, right?